Welcome to Big Blend Radio's California Employment Law Podcast featuring San Diego attorney Ward Heinrichs. You know, everybody, it is the fourth Wednesday, so Ward Heinrichs is back, our San Diego employment attorney. And today we're going to be talking about workplace violence. And there's a new act that has happened. It is called the Workplace Violence Prevention, not pretension. Don't pretend to be violent or don't be violent at all. But it's the Workplace Violence Prevention Plan. And Ward sent me this whole PDF that I'll try and get up there for you, or at least give you a link to the website in the episode notes. But wow, I'm glad I'm not in HR, Ward. Heck no. How do people do that? Like, how do you look at all of those laws and must do's and do this? And then if you do this, example A, B, C, I'd be drinking a lot of beer on the weekends.
Yeah, this is not easy. It requires coming up with a workplace violence prevention plan.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all sorts of specific requirements in this. In fact, I had a client who said, "Hey, it was like middle of July. Hey, are we supposed to do this?" And I said, "Well, yeah, you, you do have to
You have
do it, and
employees, you
it
have to do it,
and
right?
it's not easy." So they try to do it on their own, and then finally, they came back to me and said, "Hey, we need help." And then I got them in touch with Sarah. She's an HR consultant, and she's really good at that kind of stuff. I'm the guy who, if you're getting sued or if there's a threat of lawsuit, yeah, I'll jump in and we can cite the codes and all this stuff. But to get someone up and running in that's not what I do.
Mm,
So
no.
I but Sarah's good at that. And so I do have connections for that kind of thing to refer them out.
But let's talk about you. So all these preventions are in place for workplace violence, whether it's an employee against an employee, a customer against an employee, and then anybody could randomly come in. I mean, have you put burglar bars up? Do you have lights on outside at night if you have a female employee leaving, that kind of thing? Workplace violence does happen, and some is retaliation. I mean, that happened in our own family where somebody, that's how my uncle was murdered, was at work because he fired somebody, and the guy just went to his car, got his gun, and killed him and the other guy. It was the largest industrial shooting in Florida, and in the country at the time. Of course, now we've really escalated in shootings, so is that part of this workplace prevention plan is to really look at those kinds of things because there's shootings going on across the country, but then there's people just getting mad, right? And doing stupid things to each other.
I remember the term going postal.
Yeah.
Well, it was based off
Newman
an
from
incident.
Seinfeld.
Yeah, and so Seinfeld used to make fun of it, but it started with an incident like this. Now, and don't ask me all the details of that incident; I don't remember. But it was a post office employee who came back to the workplace, and I think it was a gun thing, and that's the specific part I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure it was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's the type of thing that this new workplace violence prevention plan is supposed to help curtail.
Mm,
Whether it really does or not, we'll see. But certainly it requires tracking of it. It requires putting a plan in place,
mm,
training on it and all those things that should help if
mm,
something like this happens.
mm,
And I think really that is the impetus for it is all the violent stuff that's happened, not the minor stuff so much, although
mm,
California's clear to say, hey, even the minor
mm,
stuff you got to report. We need to know
mm-hmm.
about it, and you need to have a plan in place to take care of that situation.
Well, okay, so like I'll use my uncle as an example. So he wasn't really a public company. It wasn't a storefront or anything. He was a gymnastics coach, teacher, and he was a top gymnast in California at the time, and then retired from it because you do, and was making all the equipment. So that wasn't, customers would come in, but it wasn't like a storefront. So that's kind of a rare thing, but a lot of violence will be where there's customers involved too. So whenever you do these kinds of plans, not only you're protecting your staff and yourself, but also your customers at the same time. And so, thing coming to this country that freaked me out was I was raised with you go in a grocery store, you walk through the beep beep machine to see if you have a gun and or a weapon or a grenade. Because like I come from Africa, man, this stuff is kind of a normal thing. And coming to the States, I felt like there was no security when we first got here. I was like, what the heck? This is a free for all, and and things have escalated since we've been here, not my fault. But I kind of feel like you do have to have those things in place. I mean, when we moved to Tucson, Gabby Giffords got shot in a grocery store around the corner from us, and it was crazy because a guy that went to go and meet her was actually due to be on our podcast that same day. Yeah. And he was a
Guy that
psychiatrist.
shot her?
Yeah, no, no, no. A guy, a psychiatrist was to be on our podcast. She got shot during the broadcast, and he was supposed to be on, and he was texting me. Everyone's texting me. We're doing this live show, this podcast, as we've been doing, and he's like, "I'm going to be late. I was just here. I met Gabby Giffords, and then she got shot," and he freaked out. And he's already been in a shooting in a bank. This guy before, but eventually I just said, well, you should still come on the show. We want to know what happened, and what is going on, and talk about this kind of stuff. But that's the thing. These kinds of things in a workplace could happen in a grocery store. It could happen anywhere, right? A bar, you got breweries. Breweries, people are just happy, right?
Well, I suppose if you fire the wrong person who works at a brewery, that kind of thing. Uh, one thing though, I mean, the chances of this actually happening anywhere are really small, but it's
Mm-hmm.
devastating when it does happen. And so
Yeah.
I think that's what we've got this reaction.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly, no place is completely insulated. Now, there's some exceptions to the regulations and law. For instance, one of the main exceptions is, well, if you have fewer than 10 employees in a place that's not open to the public. So they're saying, all right, there's less risk here, so we don't have to have you guys track. Now, you still could, I guess, fire one of those 9 employees and they come back with a gun.
This
It's
that's what
possible.
happened to my uncle. 3 employees.
Yeah.
Two are
Well,
well, they're all
not
gone
open to the
now.
public is the idea, though, and I
Yeah.
think they're probably thinking security
Mm-hmm.
cards and things like that. So that would make it really hard to come back in if you fire someone because you're going to take their card. But still, is it possible that could happen? It could, but California said, well, no, under those circumstances, we think the risk is so low, we're not going to
Okay.
require this type of plan.
Yeah, and it's expensive for small businesses to put this, even to stop and,
It
day-to-day
is.
work and
Oh my
put this kind of
gosh.
thing together is important. So I was thinking about this just to get really wonky on you because you sent me this big list of all these requirements. Again, everyone, I'm putting the link there for you. Go get go get
Full
an HR
disclosure,
specialist. I'm just
I decided not to write an article on this because
you're
I
like,
knew
I'm
I was just
not,
going to write
no,
lists, and it's just
I
like I
know
don't want
it's
to do
just
that.
no. Who wants to do a list? The list is there. Go get an HR specialist. Period. But I wanted to ask you about this because this is kind of interesting. Going back a few years, the whole independent contractor thing. And remember, we were talking about how musicians were also kind of swept up into that. If musicians playing in a bar, if they're regulars, like, look at the Las
Yeah,
Vegas residency, right? So Janet Jackson is going there now, right? Or we had Garth Brooks there. Anyway, so we had all these, I didn't say anything. Um, we had, these musicians that can have a residency for 3 months, 6 months. And, if it was in California, what happens with is that an independent contractor or not? So, what happens at these festivals where musicians or entertainers come in, even vendors are not there? You know what I mean? You may be paying someone, but if it's only one night, it's not a big deal. See what I mean? If something goes down, because a lot of these festivals,
could California require them to have this plan in place
yeah,
under
I
those
mean, you can't do a
circumstances?
street fair. Like, you cannot be a vendor at a street fair without having X amount of insurance. And you can buy insurance from them. Isn't that amazing? Um, but this is where we are, right? Insurance, permits. And so a lot of these things are there for good reason or just extra red tape, cash cows. Um, but if you're doing that kind of event, like if you're kind of an independent contractor-ish, doesn't that kind of touch on this too about your own protection if you're going to do work with someone in a public kind of space? How about that?
Yeah,
Ooh.
interesting. All right, so there are only a few exceptions to this rule. And so if you have employees, you're certainly required to do it in most cases. Now, I think what you're saying is, well, what if you just have independent contractors? Is that part of this?
Yes. So, like, if you have a band coming in, say you're doing a concert series, like you have Humphreys by the Bay. Ooh, good show.
This
Like that, we
location.
love
Yep.
that, right? So people go down there during the summer. There's a wonderful series, and maybe you have a band, and you're going to play every Friday and be the backing band. You're going to be like the house band. Now, you're not necessarily an employer, right? An employee, but you are kind of an independent contractor, but your safety needs to be protected if you're going to be there. I'm just saying. Or does it go by amount of times? Yeah. What if you're the Uber driver that picks someone up and something happens? You see it? I'm going on the independent contractor
Yeah.
side.
You're asking a very good question that I'm not sure I have a great answer to, but here's my thought. All throughout this regulation, they talk about employers, employers, employers. So if you're technically not an employer, maybe you don't have to do this, especially for a one-off. I'm
Hmm.
doing a big event and then it's over. So I'm not sure you have to do something like that. I would say, but if you have a bunch of employees, then I would
Hmm.
think, well, maybe you have to.
Hmm.
There's not an exemption that I know of for that.
Okay. Yeah, because what
Uh,
about
you know
caterers
what?
and
Hold on.
okay.
I,
So everyone I got okay. I'm gonna
all right.
pause this. Oh, you got it. Oh, look at this huge book. See, this is why Ward's a lawyer and I am not because he can read this stuff. We got into the legalese thicket of this because
Yes.
well, this
All
is
right.
a huge list. All
Yeah.
right.
No. 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 Plan, threat of violence. La di da di da. Let's see what it says. I'm just going to go through some of these definitions really fast.
Wow, look at that book.
Work practice
Dang.
controls.
Look at all your books back there. Everyone, Ward can read. I know he can write too.
I can read and write.
Yes, you want that in an attorney. I'm just saying, but this
The
is
employer
fascinating
shall
to me.
provide effective training to employees as specified. So, I keep seeing the word employer in here. And so if you're technically not an employer, and I don't see anything that says this would cover someone who only has independent contractors.
Hmm.
Hmm. So
It's
that's my
only
best
employers.
answer. It's just for employers.
Okay, well there it is. Okay, so that was just my question on that. And then is this also different than healthcare? Because I saw that all over healthcare, non-healthcare, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I wanted to
Yeah.
bring that up because look what
Yeah.
is going on in India with that doctor that got raped and killed. She was working 36 hours or something, went and took a break during her shift. It was in Bangladesh, I believe it was. And she didn't have any place to close her eyes for a little bit, went into a study or something like that, whatever kind of room, seminar room, conference room, and got raped and killed and murdered. And apparently the hospitals are, there's no security. This is the kind of thing I'm like talking about. So I wonder about this. Like, I remember when I was in the hospital with my arm, I was like, anybody could just walk in the hospital and just go start killing people. That was my mind. They gave me a lot of morphine and I got wonky, man. But so does this not cover hospitals and healthcare and stuff like that?
The specific one, hospitals, healthcare, and police departments are exempt too, law enforcement.
Okay.
For good reason. They're governed by different rules that require this, and same with the healthcare um, protective plan against violence. That was legislated and came into effect at January. Well, maybe it was April 1 of 2017. And so healthcare has been doing this for a long time in California already.
So they already have it. They're
They already
set.
have it. It's under a different code, but it's there.
We're not like India. Yeah, that's pretty violent what was happening. And it's not the first thing. And no doctor is really safe. So that's kind of, you know, so when I was, we're going to talk about this today, I'm thinking this is why these things are in place. We because things do get wonky in the world, and so anything can happen at any time because people are people, and retaliation can happen or just can. This is violence, so it's when someone is really going to go and do something. So this could lead towards murder or all kinds of stuff.
Lead to that, but all sorts of, threats
Mm.
are a violation of this, and they have to be recorded by the employer, and then addressed by the employer. That's what this all requires.
Mm.
So even if you don't think that the threat's all that serious, it really needs to be written down, and you really need to address it.
Okay, so what about harassment? Okay, because we talk about this a lot. Can harassment can lead to violence, as we all know, right? So does this kind of connect in regards to you need to have employee training, and even for management needs to have these trainings so that they do not, if there's any form of harassment, isn't that kind of covered in this too?
It depends what kind of harassment we're talking about. If it's violent harassment, where they threats of violence, I'm not going to go into the actual
Yeah.
include in this discussion the actual act of violence. But short of that, if there's a threat of violence, yes. There is something else in this that now I'm not remembering. It's a little broader than just the threat of violence. I think that, um, boy, there is something
Yeah,
else
because
that
harassment too
expands
can
it.
go into
It's
in,
not just harassment though. So, because any harassment might, if your boss is saying, "Hey, um, you're a woman and I want you to sit on my lap. Is
that's
that
not.
is that a threat?
Oh
I
boy, so now we're going
don't
to get into
think
Bill Clinton.
so.
Is that? But
Yeah.
anyway, so
But
no,
let's go to a different scenario. How about he says,
if someone
"Hey,
says,
get my coffee. You got to
I'm going
get
to
my
kick
coffee
your
every
butt."
morning. It's just because you're a woman." All right, that's a type of harassment and discrimination. I don't think that's covered under this.
Well,
So
if
not
it's
all
if it's
harassment would be covered.
sexual harassment, racial discrimination could lead to violence.
It can lead to it, no doubt. But are all acts of harassment or discrimination covered by this Workplace Violence Prevention
But
Act?
it is there
No.
something to say, hey, well, we need to okay, let's put it this way. The people that do these insane acts of violence, we go back in the history of them, and you'll find out that they've been documented in different things that they've done in the past, but no one's putting it all into one computer thing to go, hey, this person did this over here. And so maybe we should consider not hiring him, or, you know what I mean? Watch them. So, like, if you've been nailed, that's a bad word, violence or harassment. If you've, like, not you, Ward, but if someone in a workplace has been discriminatory or harassing an employee, right, within the company, or even a customer, right, continues to harass an employee for whatever reason, that should be notified somewhere to kind of give you like an awareness that you may want to curtail things until it leads to a moment like, here's this young girl working in a store, let's put it this way, in a retail outlet, right? And there's one manager who just won't stop talking about her butt or something, right? And then one night she goes to close up and he decides, oh, I'm going to come by, and she's walking to her car alone, and bada bing, you know, things get out of control. That could happen if the other part wasn't documented, but beyond documented, taken action. So that would be a prevention act in my mind.
Yeah, well, if you saw the red flags early and you
Yeah,
said, "Hey, we need to address this." Now, I think you can think of it two different ways. One would be, well, maybe some of this stuff is under the Violence Prevention Act, um, but maybe it's just good harassment interdiction. So,
that's a big word, Ward.
well, and I would agree with it though. I would
Mm.
say, hey, look, if this behavior is something that looks like it could be sexual harassment, or at least the beginnings of it, it's better to nip it in the bud.
Yeah.
So I think that employers should be very aware of that, at least that,
Mm.
and address it, and that would also take care of the problem you're talking about, where it progresses to the point of violence.
Right.
So in my mind, it's more of a harassment thing, and you should really pay attention to that early and take care of it.
Mm,
And if you don't, boy, you can be liable.
mm.
Let's say that, bada bing, it didn't happen, that bad act that you're talking about. You still have liability under general harassment law for all the stuff that
Okay.
led up to that.
Okay, so now let's talk about if a company didn't do what they were supposed to do. Let's say you run a bar and you don't have lighting outside for your female employees to go get in their car and drive home safely. They don't have someone there to protect. Like there, one person shouldn't be in charge of a cash register. Let's put it that way.
Well,
Things like
that's
that,
true. And I would say
right?
also for male employees too, walking out in the dark, you never know. They piss someone off and two of their buddies come in and
Hey,
beat them up. So
the
any of
women
that can
can
happen.
it can have it's really we shouldn't, go by gender, right? So, if if so, if there's stuff that they should do to protect their staff and their customers and they didn't do it and they don't have these meetings and then something bad happens, especially if an employee has raised concerns.
Yeah.
Like an employee should raise a concern, right? If I think they
Yeah,
should.
sure.
Um, and then something bad happens, that's when you get called in and you have a big
Yeah,
mess to
and,
clean.
and the fact that they didn't do what was required in the this prevention policy could be used against them. It's so new. I haven't seen that. I don't know about it, but I'm sure it could be
I mean,
because
it really just got signed
that's so
in, right?
typical in these kinds of
Yeah.
cases. You go, all right, did you have a harassment policy? Did you have it in your handbook? Go through all that stuff. And if you didn't, it looks really bad. It's like you
Mm,
weren't prepared for this and you just didn't act properly. So you want it written and you want to apply what the policy is.
mm,
Um, and further, now if it goes to the level of violence that you're talking about and you haven't done these things in this prevention policy, then yeah, that
mm.
I'm sure can be used against you. I'm sure you're going to face cross-examination on your inability to even have a plan or at least follow it.
Now, don't banks have to really do this? Financial institutions, they have to have these plans, hardcore
Well, I think they've probably been doing it for
for
years. I
years. They
mean,
have
yeah,
to.
something
It's like,
similar. Now, this may be more detailed than what banks have done in the past. I don't know.
mm,
I'm not a banker. I haven't worked in banks. I go into banks all the time, sometimes, and you got to go through the metal detectors. And it's just like,
bing.
hey, this is serious.
My
So
rod
I
in my
think
arm doesn't
banks
go off with them, and I thought they would, but it doesn't.
because of the money, and the lure of bank robbers with guns, I think they've taken a lot of precautions, but I'm not
Mm,
sure that they've done all of these things, and they may
mm.
have to, beef it up some.
Yeah, I mean, because I think I told you about this on the last show. We started talking about marijuana and pot and everything since it's legal. And I just did a podcast about Oakland, and Oakland has an amazing cannabis trail. And so I was talking with a travel writer who went there, and I'm all like, "Did you do it? Come on, tell the truth." So we were talking about that. And she said she went to the dispensary, and it's like, she said, it's like walking into an Apple store. I said, well, that's really interesting. Did you pay by cash or did you pay with credit card kind of thing? And she says, you know what? I think they told me cash. And what's interesting to me is like when we were in Seattle, on the news, the local news, it was just another robbery, another shooting, and it was about the, the criminals knew that it was cash only because banks will not let you buy weed on a credit card or debit card. It's like a federal thing or something with the banks and they won't let you do it. But I'm just going to go, we all know the big ones up there, what you're doing with all that extra cash. So don't even tell me that you're not going to take weed money. But, you do get it in the end somewhere up there. But and so there's all these robberies at the dispensaries, which hurt the staff, obviously the dispensary itself, and then the customer. There is someone who came up with some kind of app now. I think that's helping with that, but I would think they would need to do this policy that you're talking about, or
Yeah,
the
I think so too. Um, and my mind was drifting back a little bit to about the independent contractor thing, and so, but if you misclassified your workers as independent contractors, I think this would still apply, and that
Mm.
you're on the hook for all this stuff, and
Ooh,
any of the fines that you could get from the government will apply to you. But that's kind of an aside. Um, yeah,
yeah.
well, the bankers and taking care, and you were talking about dispensaries where they've got cash. So any place that has cash is a target for sure. Can be a target, and sure, they better be ready with this
Mm.
type of plan now. As of July 1st is when you had to have them.
Okay.
You're
So
supposed to prepare from January to June 30th, and then on July 1st have it ready. But a lot of people haven't.
so what about people like Lyft and Uber and pizza drivers, like people that drivers and DoorDash, this wouldn't even go to them because they're independent contractors. But like you could be going to someone's house to deliver
I
pizza
wouldn't
and they'll
call
go,
them.
get you, come into my house, little girl, you know.
22 kind of made them a hybrid. They get certain benefits that would be like employees. So I don't know how that would actually play out. Maybe they do
Mm,
need it. And of course, you're right. That type of driver, taxi cab drivers, Lyft, Uber drivers, they're targets too.
mm-hmm.
Now, of course, one difference between them and the dispensary is they don't always take cash. In fact, I think most of it's paid through the Uber
The
app.
app.
So you don't have the same problem.
But you have a car.
Yeah, you got a car. Yep. And you probably do have some cash because I know I've given cash as a tip to Uber
Mm,
drivers before.
yeah.
Um, but it's not the same thing as the dispensary. I mean, that, all cash. Oh my gosh, of course they're going to get focused on.
When people are desperate, I mean, they'll do it for $10. If it's a
That's
drug
true
thing,
too.
that's the other part. It's looking at how our country is. It's not just these mass shootings and everything. It's the opioid epidemic. Epidemic, that was a new word. Epidemic.
Think you
That was a
passed.
good one though. That was
Yeah.
pretty good. I like that word. Huh. Anyway, so that whole thing is like you've got people committing crimes just out of desperation for their next hit or for food or for these smaller crimes, which can lead to bigger circumstances. So acts of violence can lead to someone being, disabled. It could lead to someone's death. It could lead to mental trauma, all kinds of things. And if you didn't have that, that's when things can escalate into even criminal charges, right? If something really bad happened. Not to scare
Absolutely.
people, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a part of the reason why we got this protective plan about, violence protective plan is to limit those types of situations where that type of injury you're talking about would happen. So
mhm.
that's I think the key part of all of this is, hey, there's just enough of this out there because one of the statistics I read said that there's like 1.4 million incidents of workplace violence or at least threats of violence. And so that 1.4 million, and that was the United States, but still, that's a lot. That's a
That's
lot.
pretty big. Well, yeah, because
Well,
there's
when
even
you think of all the
stalkers,
little things that happen, I mean, all right,
Yeah,
two guys are talking about football and they go, screw you, I'm sure that happens, and it's not that big of a deal, but it could end up being a big deal. That's what California is saying.
I've seen fist fights at work before. I've
Sure,
seen hands down fist fights, the whole thing,
sure.
which what do we all now we didn't have smartphones back then when that happened, but that would have been fun to just go look at this, news of the day. It creates good gossip, but it is violence, right? And so it's having that
There's no place
culture.
in the workplace, really, obviously.
Yeah. And this is where we're getting to the holidays and now, holidays parties are back. So this leads to, you know, that
Drinking at
again.
holiday parties, and that I've seen that happen at a holiday party where two guys were getting
Oh,
into it. I don't think punches were thrown. At least I didn't see it. But I think they did meet up after the party,
oh
and
my
they
God. It's
did
like we're gonna
did
have a
throw
duel.
punches.
Back
Yeah,
in the day we had duels. I mean, it was crazy, right? Like you just kill each other off. Like, all right, one of us is gonna die, you know, here.
yeah,
That's crazy. But yeah, this is important, I think. I mean, obviously in my family it is, and
yeah.
that guy killed two people, and they had families, and that sucked. But we did get him. He did get arrested, and he tried to actually kidnap his own kid. as well. And he got nailed thanks to America's Most Wanted. Justice. Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, if you know. So anyway, Ward, you're saying everyone needs to make sure they get their HR specialist on this.
Yeah, or I know that some of my clients have tried to do it on their own, and it's really hard, but they've done it. So you can do it on your own, but it's detailed and a
Especially
lot of
if
work.
you have a lot of employees. And I'm thinking like the Fast Food Act, Act, the fast food one, they're probably embracing this for sure. They have
Yeah,
to.
well, fast food restaurants always have a lot of employees, so you got to train. You got to do training as part of this. So yeah, it's work. It's work to put it together, and it's work to implement it. And then you have to have
Yeah.
someone in charge of it, who for every little incident they've got to write it down on a log, and then
Every meeting,
you're
every
supposed to
training.
talk about it and say, "Here's what we can do better."
Mm.
So
And for you,
there's a lot of responsibility.
and for people to understand when things do end up in a legal issue, if you've done your homework and you have all of that stuff detailed for you, it's going to be easier to help them than if they haven't. You know what I mean? And then lawyer fees get even bigger, don't they, when they haven't done their homework? I'm just saying.
Usually, because it ends up being such a mess that the liability is big, and depending on how you want to handle it, if it goes to litigation, the litigation, um, yeah, no, it's a mess, and it could be
Wow.
really expensive.
Okay, so do the due diligence. I'm
Yeah,
sorry it
you
gets
really
so
need
hard,
to.
but the world is a little wonky and protect your staff, man, and your clients.
I mean, it's a law in California, so you really have to do it.
Yeah, everyone has alarms, Put your little ringer on at the front door. you
Probably
know,
not a bad idea. Cameras, I think, are always a good idea.
Cameras, they have solved so many crimes now. Cameras everywhere.
Absolutely. Yep.
I mean, hotels have them, I mean, everywhere. Just don't put them in the rooms. That's weird. Um,
Well, there can be privacy issues, but in public places, in workspace, generally, no privacy. Of course, in the
yeah.
bathroom, well, that's a whole different thing. There's privacy there.
Yeah, the grandson of Bucky's, Bucky's, like I know you're in California, but Bucky's is like a institution in the South. It's like a
But I can't describe it to you.
it's like a giant gas station with a giant shop and food and all of
Oh
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
they're
Bucky's is yeah. So the one dude got in trouble for putting cameras in the bathroom.
yeah. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
There's certain places where cameras should not be.
Don't do
Bathroom
that.
is one of them.
Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't. What's his name did it too in his restaurant? What's his name? Ah, the guitarist, the rock and roll dude. Come on. Begins with a C. Oh, come on.
There's so
Oh.
many guitarists rock and roll. Eric Clapton.
No, no, no. The original Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry.
Oh, Chuck Berry.
He had a restaurant and he had peepholes and he got in trouble.
Those are a whole different thing than a
But he
camera.
had them in his
Cameras for
bathroom.
safety.
Well, they didn't
Peepholes
have
are just for
cameras then.
looking.
No, this
Oh,
was people's to watch, and he did. He watched women go in the bathroom. So anyway, see how this show ends up. Don't ever send me a list like that again. I don't even think any employer wants it either, but it's important, everyone.
it's
Check it
there.
out. I've got the link to the website at least. That PDF is enough. I'm glad we're recording this on a Friday because I think I need a cocktail after that. Just saying.
But yeah,
I know. I know. Well, thanks so much, Ward. We're looking forward to next month.
sounds like a plan. Thanks for
Well,
having me.
listen, stay safe. Everyone, bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com. Don't forget. Take care, Ward.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's California Employment Law Podcast with San Diego attorney Ward Heinrichs. Keep up with Ward at bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com or follow him on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also subscribe to Big Blend Radio at bigblendradio.com.